Welcome back to Cigar and A Crime. I'm your host, Dr. D, coming to you live from the Cigar Lounge of Truth, where the air is thick with smoke and heavier with truth. Tonight, we're going to talk about a growing epidemic, road rage. In the U.S., road rage is responsible for over 30 murders per year, and thousands more are injured in traffic-related violence. But in Houston, that number hits harder, y'all. Between 2014 and 2023, Houston ranked number one in the nation for road rage incidents. With over 215 documented cases, it's a city where aggression doesn't end at the wheel. And sometimes, it ends with a funeral. So whatever you're doing, open that humidor, light up your best smoke, and put some smoke in the air. Because what happened to Louise Wilson is a story you'll never forget. The cigar I've chosen for tonight is my father's, The Judge. Its box-press frame feels deliberate, weighted, like the gavel of justice it's named for. The Ecuadorian Sumatra wrapper is chestnut brown, almost regal with veins like the scars of a long battle. I toast a foot, I draw deep, and a surge of red pepper spice hits the back of my tongue, sharp, immediate, unrelenting. It reminds me of the anger that flared in an instant on that Houston freeway. The reckless spark that ended a young girl's life. But then, the smoke begins to settle. Dark chocolate and espresso emerge. Bitter yet steady, echoing the weight of grief Louise's family now carries every day. Midway through, the cigar kind of softens up. Cedar and roasted nuts come forward, a fleeting sweetness threading through the smoke like memories of Louise's laughter in a small-town cafe, or her hands brushing the mane of her horse. The sweetness lingers, reminding me that even in tragedy, her light endures. Each puff of this Judge is complex, is bold, balanced, uncompromising. A cigar that demands patience and respect. Tonight, its very name feels like a summons, a reminder that justice must one day be delivered. And with that, let's step into the story of Louise Wilson, her life, her courage, and the night when rage and violence tried to silence her. Let me introduce you to this case. It was 1:05 a.m. on December 10th, 2023. Louise was just 17 years old. She was driving a red Chevrolet Sonic. Riding with her that night were two of her friends, her boyfriend and a close friend. Both also was 17 years old. The trio had left Whitney, Texas with one goal in mind, to catch the sunrise in Galveston. But dreams of the coast were shattered in downtown Houston. As Louise navigated the Pierce elevated section of I-45, she swerved, trying to avoid a slowing vehicle, and unknowingly cut off a black sedan. The driver of that car retaliated. He pulled up beside her and fired one bullet directly to her heart. Despite being mortally wounded, Louise managed to steer the car into the shoulder. One of her passengers had been shot. The other was unharmed. Yet it was what she did in her final moments, easing the car to safety, that possibly saved both their lives. To this day, the names of the young man and woman who rode with Louise have not been made public. Their privacy and integrity of the investigation remain closely guarded by law enforcement. Who was Louise Wilson? Her life, her values, and character. Before the night of December 10th, Louise Wilson was a vibrant young woman with a full life and big dreams. To understand the impact of her loss, we need to know who Louise was. Louise grew up in a proud military family. In fact, she was born on an army base in Germany. While her parents were stationed overseas, being part of a military family really meant moving often. Louise saw different parts of the country from a very young age. To provide stability and all that, her parents, Daniel and Krista, homeschooled her. It turned out Louise was a natural learner. Her dad said she was a self-starter and a quick learner. Her dad even mentioned that he rarely had to push her to do schoolwork. She especially loved science and history and showing an early curiosity about how the world works. Her friends and family described her kind-hearted, determined, and generous. One story in particular that really speaks volumes to me was she was 14 years old when she noticed a friend struggling with his faith. She invited him to their Baptist church, and an invitation that her friends credits that really changed his life and guiding him back to a positive path. Acting of kindness like this came naturally to Louise. A co-worker even mentioned that even in the briefest encounter with Louise, you were blessed and you knew it. She was that type of person who lit up a room, a budding shimmer of light, as one of her co-workers called it. Louise had a special love for animals, especially horses. While her family was stationed in South Carolina during her childhood, they adopted a horse, and Louise was smitten by that horse. At just 10 years old, she accomplished something astonishing. She and her dad joined a 100-mile horseback ride across Texas, riding from Jacksboro to Fort Worth in the blazing sun and rain. Louise was the youngest rider on that week-long journey, impressing the seasoned cowboys with her grit and earning the event's Whippersnapper Award for her achievement. She was a trooper, her father said proudly. Louise was always the first to make lemonade out of lemons. That phrase alone, making lemonade out of lemons, captures her optimistic spirit. By her late teens, Louise was beginning to find her path in life. She had mentioned aspirations of going into law enforcement someday, a reflection of her desire to help others and stand for justice. In the fall of 2023, Louise was living in Whitney, a small town about 30 miles north of Waco, with her family. She had recently started working at a local restaurant called The Cafe. At 17, Louise was on the cusp of adulthood, juggling her job, spending time with her beloved horse, and making plans for the future. Importantly, Louise was deeply loved by those around her. She was the only child of the doting parents of Daniel and Krista, and she formed close bonds in her community despite moving often. In Whitney, she quickly developed a circle of friends. She had recently started dating a boy she cared for. The two were practically inseparable, as evidenced by him joining her on that ill-fated Galveston trip. When we usually talk about victims of crime, especially in dry statistics, we risk losing sight of their humanity. But hearing these stories, Louise's love for her horse, or tutoring younger kids at church, or excitingly planning a spontaneous road trip to see the sunrise, remind us that she was so much more than a statistic. She was a daughter, a friend, a co-worker, a person of faith and kindness. She had a full life ahead of her. All of this makes the events of December 10th that much more heartbreaking, because everything Louise was, her kindness, her optimism, her potential, was stolen in a sudden act of violence. Now let's revisit the incident itself with more detail and look into the investigation that followed. We've already heard this dramatic overview. Now we'll break down what we know from police reports and news releases and what happened, and sadly not happened, in the search for Louise's killer. In the early hours of December 10th, 2023, Louise Wilson's red Chevy Sonic was found on the shoulder of I-45 in Houston. Police and paramedics arrived to a grim scene. They found Louise unresponsive in the driver's seat, suffering from gunshot wounds. Despite quick response, Louise was beyond help. The bullet that struck her caused catastrophic injury. And this vibrant 17-year-old was pronounced dead. One of her passengers, her boyfriend, had also been shot. A non-fatal wound, and was rushed to the hospital as well. The other friend in the car was physically unharmed, but I know that kid was emotionally traumatized. In an instant, a fun road trip had turned into a homicide investigation. Houston police homicide detectives began piecing together what happened. Witness accounts from Louise's surviving friends painted the initial picture. They explained that shortly before the shooting, another vehicle had braked suddenly in front of Louise's, nearly causing a wreck. Louise reacted by swerving to the next lane and inadvertently cutting off a car behind her. That car, described as a newer model dark-colored four-door sedan, then chased and pulled alongside Louise's vehicle. A man leaned out and fired multiple shots directly into the car of Louise. At least 3 bullet holes were later found in the Chevy. One bullet struck Louise in the heart, killing her almost immediately. And another bullet, of course, struck her boyfriend in the arm. It all happened in a matter of seconds. The suspect sped away into the darkness before any of the stunned passengers could note a license plate. There were no other cars immediately around to witness the shooting, which is a tragic stroke of bad luck on what is normally a very busy urban highway. And here is the cruel irony. Less than 1,600 feet down the road, there was a TxDOT traffic camera mounted alongside I-45. However, like most TxDOT cameras, it was for live monitoring only and did not record that footage. So as the dark sedan made its escape, the camera's live feed showed the vehicle for only a brief moment, but no recording existed to help them identify it. This is crucial evidence that vanished into thin air, literally out of scope. The suspect remains unidentified. He was described as a light-skinned black male in his mid-20s with short dreadlocks dyed blonde, driving a newer model black four-door sedan. A $20,000 reward was posted. A composite sketch was released. But as December going into January, no arrest has been made. A major obstacle in this investigation, the lack of recorded surveillance footage. Although the Texas Department of Transportation operates traffic cameras across Houston, they do not store or archive footage. That critical moment when a car pulled up alongside Louise's was seen by the city's eyes, but not remembered. Her father, Daniel, already grieving, turned that pain into purpose. He advocated for House Bill 2621, which would mandate that traffic footage be archived for at least 30 days. He stated, if we had the footage, he says, we might have already have the man who killed my daughter. In Whitney, Louise's loss rippled through every home and hallway. In Houston, it shook even more people awake. Her friends and family created a foundation in her name. Billboards now display the suspect's sketch. TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter flooded with the hashtag Justice for Louise. Daniel and Krista Wilson, they appeared on local media and advocated at the Capitol. Louise's mother, called her daughter a firecracker, a girl who never quit, who never backed down from anything, and who died a hero. The Houston community, long accustomed to tragedy, rallied. There were candlelight vigils. There were community meetings on gun violence and road rage. Still, they wait for justice. As of now, the killer remains unidentified. One bullet, one freeway, one life gone, and no one held accountable. Experts noted that road rage had increased by more than 500% in the past decade. In Houston, it's become an epidemic. Drivers cut off, followed, threatened, and in tragic cases like Louise's, murdered. Between 2014 and 2023, Texas recorded 741 road rage incidents involving guns. In those Texas cases, someone was shot in about 72% of those incidents, which means over 530 of those incidents resulted in injury or death. The toll, 146 people killed and more than 430 people wounded in Texas road rage. And that's during over a decade. No other state had as many. That's why this House Bill 2621 was crucial in May when it passed. And it passed with little opposition. It was a landmark move. We have to ask ourselves, why is this happening? Experts cited convergence of factors. Could it be more drivers carrying guns? In many states, especially those with permissive gun laws like Texas, it's increasingly common for ordinary drivers to keep a firearm in their vehicle. Texas law allows any legally eligible adult to carry a handgun in their car. And since 2021, Texans can carry without a permit or training. This means a routine fender bender or someone getting cut off might involve two armed parties. Research has shown that presence of a gun can dramatically increase aggressive behavior. A famous 2017 study published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology found that motorists with a gun in their vehicle drove more aggressively than those without one. What about stress and traffic congestion? Anyone who's been on I-45 in Houston knows how frustrating traffic can be. Long commutes, bumper-to-bumper congestion, and the general stress of just modern life contribute to driver anger. The AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety reported that a vast majority of drivers, about 8 in 10, experience significant anger or aggression behind the wheel. That could be anything from yelling, honking in fury, to making rude gestures. And in most cases, it doesn't go beyond that. But it shows the baseline. Aggressive driving is common. Now add in the aforementioned firearms and you have a volatile mix. Some experts like clinical psychologists talk about a broader issue of diminished conflict resolution skills and a culture that in certain circles glorifies retaliatory violence. If someone grows up hearing "don't let anyone mess with you" or consuming action movies where a minor slight is avenged by force, they might be more prone to react violently in real life. Road rage can be seen as the ego battle. He cut me off. He disrespected me. I must assert my dominance. And then you combine that mindset with a weapon, and you get what we're seeing right now. In a city known for its sprawl, for its heat, for its speed, one young girl pulled over to die, and in doing so, may have saved others. That's the kind of story we will never forget in this lounge. Louise Wilson was just 17, but her spirit, it carried the weight of a warrior. She lived fully. She loved animals. She worked hard. She was a straight-A student. She planned to serve others in law enforcement. Her life was a promise. And in her final moments, that promise didn't fade. It burned brighter. She controlled her car while bleeding out. She made sure her friends were safe. She died saving others. Think about that. Her death is a call, loud and unrelenting, to make the system work better, to catch the coward who pulled the trigger, and to remember that behind every statistic is a heartbeat, a name, a story. This was Louise Wilson. We refuse to let her memory fade into just another crime statistic. In telling her story, we carry Louise's light forward, hoping it guides us to the truth and to change. Finally, I want to leave you with a thought. The next time you find yourself on the road and something annoying happens, someone cuts you off or flips you the bird, take a deep breath and choose peace. Remember Louise. Remember that behind each wheel is a human life. And none of us truly wants a moment of anger to define our fate. The streets remember what justice forgets, but in this lounge, we never stop looking. You've been listening to Cigar and A Crime with Dr. D, broadcasting from the Lounge of Truth. If Louise's story moved you, share it with a friend, discuss it, and keep her memory alive. Be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our channel for future episodes. If you're joining us on YouTube, we invite you to leave a comment with your thoughts or just a word of support for Louise's family. In this lounge, we stay lit and the truth stays loud. Until next time, stay vigilant out there on the roads. And remember, the smoke never lies.